but he made some decent progress today. At least now he has some understanding of the activating conditions of the lights. Who would have thought that the key to activating the bizarre skill lies in his very own consciousness? All he has to do is enter a meditative trance. His method involves imagining himself out in nature in his bare form, free from the constraints of human civilization. In other words, buck naked. In his mind palace, he walks on the ground with bare feet, his soles making direct contact with the soil where life grows. Sunlight kisses his skin as all life around him harmonizes. Just like Adam in the Garden of Eden, his body and mind are both part of the natural world, a peaceful resonance of all that has life. Once he enters that state of mind, he slowly opens his eyes and a familiar green glow appears once again. This ability of his is directly connected to his consciousness. Working from that concept, he could freely call on the green light. Now that he's done with all the plant samples with a low success rate, it's time to move on to a different type of specimen. The target of the second experiment would be all kinds of meats this time around. So he slowly brought his right hand wrapped with the green light towards a juicy slab of meat. He already half expected it, but it's still disappointing that there were no reactions at all. Maybe the green light only works on plants. Thinking that the gentle approach might not be effective, Han Feng grabbed his meat and squeezed hard while praying that his right hand would work its magic. After a few minutes, he had to accept that nothing would happen. You could see the defeat and dejection in his tired eyes. That was when he thought of the sensation he felt while meditating. In a trance, he could sense two distinct colors, the red and green lights. Throughout the experiments, he hasn't tried using the red one yet. Grasping the primary trigger function of his ability, he only has to concentrate on bringing that red light out of his consciousness. While still holding the meat, he closed his eyes and tried to reach for the other ability lying dormant inside his system. After a little while, a spark of red light finally made an appearance on his right hand. With that initial spark, the glow swiftly wrapped around his hand. Surprisingly, it also wrapped around the piece of meat. It looked like it was creating some sort of bubbling reaction at the meat's surface. A few seconds of intense concentration later, Han Feng opened his eyes to a putrid pile of hardened dark red sludge that looked like it came right out of hell as the red light subsided. He immediately threw that vile thing on the ground out of sheer disgust. You would undoubtedly do that too, in his position. Realizing that this disfigured sludge might provide some valuable insights, Han Feng crouched on the ground to observe it. He poked the thing, and it was a little squishy. So this is how meats would react to the red light. It might look revolting, but the texture and overall feel point towards the possibility that the meat got cooked or something. Was this really all the red light can do? Heat things up? Stoves and pans could do the same thing, and they could produce more appetizing meals than whatever the hell this is. Han Feng refuses to believe that's all there is to it. Upon using his consciousness to trigger his abilities a fair bit amount, he could understand his capabilities on a deeper level. If he were to describe the red light sensation, it would be like a disintegration process. His next meat experiment looked a lot better than the first one. But if that's the case, understanding the underlying concepts of these two lights might be easier than he initially thought. He grabbed a bunch of soybeans from his bean pile and gripped them hard in his right hand. In his left hand was the red light and the cooked up meat. If the green light represents the evolution of matter, then the red light is the opposite, which would be disintegration. Since he's already testing out some confusing concepts, what would happen if he combined the green light grasping beans and the red light grasping meat? The result was an even bigger reaction than he was expecting. The combination produced a bright, blinding light between his hands. When the lights died down, it was revealed that his meat got a lot bigger as a result. The meat had been supersized, but where did the soybeans in his right hand go? Could it be that the two subjects merged together, producing this giant slab? Han Feng meticulously inspected the big meat. No matter how you look at it, it's undeniably incredible. It looks, feels, and smells exactly like real meat, but even fresher somehow. Gaining some confidence that he's getting a lot better at this superpower thing, he decided to go for some more experiments. After a few hours, he was back to square one once again. His kitchen floor was filled with charred remains of meat and crops. He frustratedly threw a tantrum, and everything he tried failed miserably. Getting all that exasperation out of his system, Han Feng sat up and took a deep breath. He'll just pause the experiments for now. He can always just take his time to figure out its deeper intricacies later. Anyway, today was still a productive one, even though he ended it on a bitter and charred note. Han Feng can already see the future if he can just successfully master this mysterious power. There's no doubt about it. With infinite resources, he would be the man standing at the pinnacle of this post-apocalyptic world. It's his dream, so he could put some sweet muscles in his image. Speaking of power, he might have forgotten one of the most important aspects of survival: Food alone is not going to cut it in the coming days. He will be completely vulnerable with all this loot if he doesn't have a decent weapon to defend himself. He swiftly took the various crops littered around his floor. He has to hurry and find himself a weapon before the temperature goes on a nosedive. Looking out the window, it seems like the initial stages of the apocalypse have already started. Snow is beginning to fall from the skies. It's here. The public might think this is just a typical snowy evening, but it's not. Just like the previous timeline, it really is happening. The collapse of modern civilization is commencing. Heading outside, Han Feng fears that the temperatures will drop to 45 below within the week. He needs a gun, and fast. But buying a gun in this country is illegal, and he doesn't exactly have any connections to the criminal world. That's when he overheard a scandalous man yelling and boasting that he's a construction guy with millions riding on every project. The dude was bragging to a passerby that he knows the infamous Lao Wang from the Shigang Lida group. They're so close. They're practically brothers. Han Feng thinks he's seen this thug before. A dumbass with an exaggerated fashion style, blinged out with jewelry of questionable authenticity and over-the-top streetwear. A guy who offers everyone cigarettes for some reason. Around this area, people refer to this bleached-haired, cigarette-loving thug as Homeless Joe. Homeless Joe's real name is Li Ziyi. He likes it when people call him Brother Li, and he lives in Han Feng's neighborhood. He's reputed to be in charge of contracting projects and knows everyone around the area. If you offer him some cigs, he won't accept any other brands as he only smokes Huazi. Other brands make him cough. He's always helping his big brother with projects and looks forward to going to saunas. In reality, this bum does not have a proper job, but he always acts so busy. You often see him walking around while on a call, shouting out deals worth 20 million or 10 million as if he wants everyone to hear how successful he is. The guy is a deadbeat, but Han Feng can see that maybe Homeless Joe has the necessary connections to get what he so badly needs. So, he approached the thug, referring to him as Brother Li and saying that it's been a long time since they have seen each other. Han Feng waved with an awkward smile as he was uncertain how this guy would respond. Brother Li annoyedly asked if they knew each other as he walked closer. Being younger than Li, he introduced himself as Xiao Han, kind of like saying little bro. He swore that they'd met a while ago, so I must have forgotten. The thug complained that he's been swamped with work lately, so he can't be blamed for his bad memory. But he was pretty receptive to talk. Han Feng was being overly cautious as he was about to ask for something very illegal. He surveyed the area, looking from left to right to make sure that no one could hear what he was about to say. Then, he came up to Brother Li and directly asked for the weapon that he needed to defend himself in the coming days. Li jumped in fright and asked what he would need a gun for. That's not a good sign. Feeling like a guilty criminal, Han Feng still had to push through this as he couldn't think of anyone else who could help him with his problem. Li started speaking seriously, wanting to clear something up before they got any further. He insisted that his organization does not engage in any illegal activities and that guns are serious business. He hinted that he had the connections for it, but he was not one to mix ordinary people up with something dangerous. Han Feng pushed the thug's questionable Louis Vuitton bag out of his face and insisted that Brother Li got it all twisted. He was just inquiring about some firearms for self-defense, as he has been involved in some nasty personal grudge. And so, Han Feng started lying his ass off with a story that he was making up as he spoke. According to him, one day, while riding his bike to work like usual, he ran into an old man who was just spitting everywhere on the bike line. It was so gross, and to make matters worse, the wind carried one of those disgusting globs of spit right into Han Feng's face when he was just minding his own business. Angered by the revolting old man, Han Feng threw his bike to the side and confronted the old man. What did the bastard do, you ask? The asshole decided to spit on him again while he was airing out his grievance. He could not take it anymore and brought down some street justice on the disgusting old man. He gave the guy a good old beating in the middle of the road, with everyone watching on the sidelines. As the old man left with his clothes tattered and his face messed up, the bastard swore that he would get back at Han Feng for this humiliation. The very next day, that old man was patched up and waiting for Han Feng on the usual bike route. This time, he had some goons with him. They beat Han Feng up quite badly and threatened to do it again if they ever saw him anywhere. His clothes were a mess, his face was bruised, and his body was wounded. He has never been so humiliated in his life. That is why he wants a weapon for self-defense. That's the long and short version of it. That's the story he could come up with on the spot. And it looks like it was a very effective one. Brother Li was fuming in anger as he imagined the nasty old jerk spitting on the road and hitting Han Feng. Such uncivilized behavior should not be tolerated. That's not really the point of Han Feng's story, but at least he's getting somewhere. Brother Li tapped his shoulders and assured him that this vendetta would be taken care of. He assured Han Feng that he's got our boy covered. He will just make a call to his big brother right now and they'll fetch that gun. Han Feng was starting to doubt if he made the right decision in approaching this guy. With all that tough talk, Brother Li invited him to go to the station and hop on the bus with him. His excuse was that his Panamera was being serviced in the shop, so he couldn't drive to the headquarters. Han Feng assured him that transportation wouldn't be a problem. He has his car parked right to the side, after all. The brand new vehicle immediately caught the eye of this hype beast bum. On the drive over to his big brother, Li could not stop going on and on about how Han Feng is living the good life and asked how much this new ride costs. It was about 700,000 of borrowed money. As he casually gave directions to turn left at the next intersection to reach the alleged office, Brother Li kept on snapping pics of himself sitting in the new leather seats. His social media handle was Handsome Spicy Guy, and tonight's post was a picture of his dumbass face with a caption complaining about how his SUV's seat is still too hard to sit in on account of it being new. They pulled up to one of the seedier parts of the city. Some tough-looking guys were camped outside, complaining about the messed-up weather. You can't blame them, though. It went straight from summer to hardcore winter overnight. Seeing some crisp-looking wheels pull up, everyone turned to whoever was about to exit that car. Seeing that it was Li Zi, they flocked towards him to ask what was up. Brother Li just told them that he had some stuff to handle with Boss Liu. The other thugs assumed that the new Tiger SUV belonged to Li and started hassling him about the price tag. Li did not deny it at all. He even proudly boasted that he had spent 700 grand for the car. Han Feng was not upset though. Bragging that you own the car so confidently while the actual owner is standing nearby is kind of a goated, shameless move. As soon as they entered the establishment, the one known as Boss Liu, a hardcore gangster-looking man, came out upset that Big Mouth Li would disturb him so late in the evening. Brother Li visibly turned a lot more reserved in front of the boss, even offering his cigs politely. The big guy does not have time for any of that filler nonsense, though. He's a busy man. Brother Li introduced their little brother, Han Feng, as a buyer of something special, a gun. Boss Liu wanted to confirm if he heard that correctly. As soon as the big boss looked him over, Han Feng froze up in fear. He wasn't sure what would happen if he made the wrong move or said the wrong thing. Boss Liu just stared at him silently, cigarette in mouth, seemingly scrutinizing him from head to toe. Then the big guy cracked a smile. He was quite disappointed that Han Feng only needed a lousy gun when he was expecting something more interesting. He gestured towards one of his henchmen, Cheng Zi. The henchman already knew what to do and rummaged through his jacket pocket. He tossed a pistol on the table and Boss Liu quoted a price. 6,000 for the handgun, easy to conceal and reliable. Han Feng humbly rejected it as he was thinking more along the lines of something a little longer and bigger. He was not looking for some low-caliber pea shooter. He wanted something that requires a scope to fire. Boss Liu's expression turned grave as he stared at Han Feng intently. Our boy might have crossed the line unknowingly. He immediately shut up as if he just swallowed his tongue. The big guy started yelling about how unrealistic it is to demand a freaking sniper rifle like it was nothing. He's running a discreet business here. This is not some goddamn shopping mall where you get to pick and choose what kind of illegal product you get. Boss Liu's final offer is the pistol on the table. Take it or leave it. Brother Li had to run some interference to try to calm the boss down. His idea of convincing the big guy to listen was to invent a backstory for Han Feng on his own. A made-up story that allegedly happened 5 years ago involving Han Feng's non-existent wife. Li is quite a mouthy but talented storyteller. Under the relentless downfall of snow, the boss listened to his lies all the way to the end. The story must have been phenomenal, as Boss Liu was so angered that he almost snapped the table in half. He kept repeating how disgusting those who had wronged Han Feng were. Apparently, Han Feng had 3 kids with a non-existent wife, but it turned out that none of them were his. Han Feng just stood there and went with all the lies. Even for someone nicknamed Homeless Joe, this ridiculous story was too over the top, but it worked. Boss Liu gave his personal guarantee that Han Feng would get his sniper rifle as soon as possible. He promised that he would personally make it happen, but it might take a few days. Once again, the henchman Xiangzi will be arranging everything. Boss Liu wanted something semi-automatic with loads of ammo too, so Han Feng could have what he needed. It's unexpected, but Brother Li definitely came in clutch. The big guy also handed Han Feng the handgun. He wanted to give it for free. A gift from one man to another. Han Feng was speechless. The made-up story was so good that the boss had formed some kind of one-sided bond with him. Now that it was taken care of, the big guy got back on his phone to take care of his other, more pressing businesses. Before leaving, Han Feng wanted to return the favor a little bit. He stated that a buddy of his who works for the government had told him that due to the abnormal weather, purchase limits for supplies will be implemented soon, so it's best to stock up before that happens. Seeing the serious look in the young man's eyes, as if he actually knew what he was talking about, Boss Lou could not help but take the tip seriously too. He nodded in understanding and remarked that he got it. And so, Brother Li and Han Feng exited the center of the city's underbelly with one firearm secured. On the way back, Li could not stop bragging about how he handled business like a boss, and it went beautifully. Now that his big brother, the big boss, is in a good mood, they could even ask that guy for a cannon, and he'd say yes. Han Feng wanted to thank the thug by buying him some cigarettes. Brother Li tried to be humble and insisted that he did what he did just to help him, but he would gladly take about 7 to 8 cartons of his beloved Huazi cigs. He even promised to take Han Feng to a sauna once he got paid for his so-called project. Our boy was already thinking about his next logical move. Supplies are secured and the weapon is obtained. He should be set for the early days of the apocalypse, at the very least. He can focus on studying his abilities. Fully solving the food problem would make his long-term survival chances skyrocket. He was so absorbed in his own world while walking that he didn't notice an icy part on the ground and slipped. Han Feng was so concerned with survival that he failed to follow one of the ironclad rules in the upcoming ice age. Do not get injured. He fell quite badly. His leg must have absorbed the impact of the slip and had been damaged severely. Brother Li didn't know what to do as he ran towards his new pal's side. This is bad. From the sharp pain he was feeling and the awkward landing, there was a very real possibility that his leg was broken. He shakily took his car keys out, handed them over to Brother Li, and requested to be taken to the nearest hospital as soon as possible. Li just scratched the back of his head and admitted that he actually doesn't have a driver's license, insisting that he can't drive without one. But it's safe to say that this bum just can't drive, period. At least he didn't leave Han Feng on the floor to writhe in the pain of a broken leg. He offered his shoulders to lift Han Feng up, but he struggled hard to do so. Both of them wouldn't make it to the hospital alive at this rate, so Han Feng just called a taxi that he had to pay for since Li is a broke bastard. Even the hospital, an essential establishment, was starting to freeze over under the intensifying blizzard. In the nurse's office, someone named Jian was left to take care of the night shift on this whiteout night. The snow was getting heavier, and the roads were starting to get buried deep. Head nurse Jian had only just started her night shift, but calls coming from the hall were already flooding in as the emergency section was severely short-staffed. The pretty nurse had no other choice but to step up. Upon getting an x-ray in the hospital, it was confirmed that he had really broken his leg. The doctor explained that there was a stable fracture on his right tibia. It would be easy to set, but he'd need to stay for an hour of observation before going home with his meds. This accident could not have happened at a worse time. It just had to occur before the apocalypse went into full swing. While looking at his x-ray results, Han Feng regretted being so careless. Brother Li accompanied him for most of the process, but the dude had to leave as he apparently had a few deals to handle. He's a real one though, and he even left his number in case Han Feng needed anything else. Now that he was alone in the hospital lobby, Han Feng sighed heavily. He wondered how he could make such a stupid mistake at such a crucial time. Looking at the chaos around him was stressful. The hospital quickly overflowed with patients, victims of accidents caused by the sudden blizzard and quickly plummeting temperatures. Emergency beds lined the hallways as a grim testament to the worsening conditions outside. As for him personally, he just wanted to get his meds and leave this place as fast as possible before the roads closed for good. Thankfully, his idle time would not be boring as a goddess had just walked right in front of him. Head nurse Jian had come to bolster the understaffed emergency room. The first bed she checked had a patient with heavy wounds. Next on her rotation was bed 5, where a patient's wounds had just been cleaned. Thankfully, the vitals were stable. Bed 5 just needed another dose of glucose in 10 minutes. She advised the attending nurse that if the patient's heart rate dropped below 80, epinephrine must be administered immediately. Throughout the rounds of the head nurse, Han Feng could not take his eyes off her. She was just amazing. Being a head nurse at such a young age, she must be a generational talent. On top of that, he saw how she dealt with all kinds of patients. She was kind and incredibly skilled. She looked like a radiant being in the middle of a hopeless place. Moreover, she was incredibly beautiful. She was working the hectic night shift, but her smile never faltered. She was basically an angel. He was so enamored that his eyes accidentally traveled to some ungentlemanly areas. Han Feng immediately averted his gaze out of respect. But head nurse Jian was just way too unaware of her surroundings. A real airhead. Suddenly, the old man sitting beside him started calling the attention of the pretty head nurse. She was not really required to tend to the patients outside of her rounds, but she still took the call with a smile. Head nurse Jian politely apologized to the old man and asked if she could come back a bit later to help, as she still needed to provide urgent care to some patients to cover for the staff shortage. The old man complained that his back hurt too much. He explained that the back pain had been worsening lately and wanted the head nurse to take a look to see what was causing it. In reality, this bastard was just a dirty perv trying to film below her skirt. Not noticing what was really happening, Jian just smiled and apologized once again, saying that for such back problems, they might need to schedule an x-ray just to be sure. The old perv started getting pushy, urging her to just take a quick look as he pointed to where it hurt. The bastard even got up from his seat to touch the angelic nurse inappropriately. Being the airhead that she usually was, Jian just laughed as she was naturally ticklish. For back problems, it's really advisable to wait for the resident physician's exam. The perv started pushing it, his hand crawling even lower from her waist. This disgusting act would have continued longer if something or someone had not made it stop. A freaking flying crutch forcefully smashed against the old perv, giving him some real back pain and knocking the phone away from his hands. Ever the kind-hearted healthcare worker, Jian wanted to check if the old man was all right. Thankfully, Han Feng came to her rescue, humbly apologizing for his crutch flying to the side as this was the first time he was using one. He bent over and went straight for the old perv's phone while blatantly questioning if it was broken or not. Just as he was about to touch it, the perv started sweating nervously and screaming at him to stay away from the phone. Han Feng did not listen. He walked all the way to the side of the room, got his bandage all messed up, and wouldn't let this freaking lecher get away with doing something so disgusting. As soon as he opened the phone, his suspicions were proven right. He looked at the creep directly in the eyes. If looks could kill, the geezer would have died by now. The proof was already there on the home screen. This perv had some nerve filming up a hard-working nurse's skirt and even assaulting her. There's no good reason why Han Feng shouldn't call security and have them escort the bastard to a jail cell where criminals love putting pervs in their place. Han Feng would be keeping the phone, and the next time he saw this old creep again, he threatened to ruin his miserable and revolting life. The old bastard knew he had no other choice but to flee and never show himself near this place again, and it infuriated him. The first chance he got up from that hospital floor and bolted out of the door like his life depended on it. Meanwhile, head nurse Jian was just confused as to how someone complaining about severe back pain could run so fast. Han Feng was shocked to see a first-hand display of the most comically naive person he had ever met. He decided to show her what the old fart was doing with the phone, filming up her skirt. Based on her reaction, she really did not notice anything wrong going on. Han Feng handed her the phone with the video footage so she could decide whether to wipe it or call the cops on the owner. He also reminded her to be more careful so people like that perv wouldn't take advantage of her kindness. She smiled with the brightness of 1,000 stars and then asked if Han Feng's leg was supposed to be injured. The adrenaline from catching that old perv in the act must have numbed the pain from his broken leg. But now that it was dealt with, the pain came rushing back in and he screamed in agony. Thankfully, head nurse Jian was an expert when it came to mending these types of injuries and quickly set the casting back in place. She looked at him and asked if it still hurt. Han Feng thanked her for dealing with his broken leg, and now it didn't hurt at all. At that moment, it was as if only the two of them existed in the crowded room. Jian returned the gratitude as she promised to never let such bad guys get away with messing with her anymore. She would punch them really well from now on. Han Feng just wanted her to be more aware of her surroundings. Seeing as she was letting his broken leg and feet touch her front pillows, it seemed like she had not learned anything at all. She was still as clueless and unaware as ever. While Han Feng's head was in the clouds, another nurse called for Jian as her help was needed on the emergency beds. Before going back to her rounds, the angelic head nurse reminded him not to forget to come back in a week to get his leg checked again. Han Feng promised that he would, but making any plans a week from now was unrealistic. He just smiled helplessly, for only he knew what was really going on in the world. He took the crutch that he smashed against the old perv and limped his way out of the hospital. Han Feng just accepted the fact that he wouldn't be able to see her ever again. The next day came, and the blizzard had not stopped. It had gotten even stronger instead. It had essentially frozen all infrastructure and services, making just going outside a dangerous challenge. On the morning news, emergency weather reports kept coming in about how, within the next 24 hours, all regions of the country would be experiencing heavy snowfall and a sharp drop in temperatures. Bizarre reports from overseas correspondents showed that temperatures were plummeting in every corner of the world. Dubai, Egypt, the Amazon basin, and places that should not be experiencing this type of phenomenon were seeing their land masses buried in thick blankets of snow. The nation's experts, along with specialists from 46 other countries, were rushing to the United Nations to discuss the cause of the anomalous weather. Every network kept echoing that the experts said this severe cold snap wouldn't last too long. They always ended their news reports with a public service announcement to pay attention to disaster warnings and follow arrangements made by the local government. They kept reminding citizens to remain calm, avoid spreading or believing in unfounded rumors, and refrain from hoarding supplies and panic buying, as the disaster would soon pass. Warm, cozy, and sipping wine inside his decked-out home, Han Feng clicked his tongue. The government and media just kept lying through their teeth, feeding the public BS to maintain order. If he hadn't died and come back to life already, he might even believe them. But this time was different. He was well prepared for everything that was about to come. Supplies were fully stocked, the house was reinforced, and the heating system was working flawlessly. He had been so well prepared that there was nothing to worry about for the immediate future. His phone started buzzing incessantly with messages from the Happy Housing Complex residents group chat, discussing the weird weather and how the snow was already making the roads unusable. Everyone was clearly clueless about what was happening, but not the member nicknamed Mysterious Person. Whoever this was demanded everyone's attention to inform them that the snowstorm wasn't caused by normal weather patterns, but by something within the Earth itself. Mysterious Person proclaimed that everyone should heed his words as the Ice Age apocalypse was about to begin. No one was more shocked after reading those messages than Han Feng. Who the hell is this mysterious person, and how do they know anything about the apocalypse? I guess we'll only find out if you like and subscribe.